Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to the PNS Research Workshop. My name is Jan Magielski. I'm Vice President for External Events, and today our event will feature our academic advisor, Dr. Kelly, and our board members who will answer some questions about what they're doing on the daily basis and their research, and hopefully that will help you navigate the world of research more and get excited about your scientific research in general. So first, I will give the floor to Dr. Kelly, who will talk about her research background and research opportunities at the neuroscience department. Then we will move on to the independent study panel, and we will finish with the diverse world of research panel. Each of the panels will be followed by a series of Q&A, so please have your questions ready. You may type them in the chat, and we will field them to our panelists. So without further ado, Dr. Kelly, for yours.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Mary Ellen Kelly. I'm new to the University of Pennsylvania. I arrived in September of 2021. So, and my official title is undergraduate neuroscience coordinator. So I'm in charge of doing a lot of work for the and rostering courses and working with students and advising students in the neuroscience program at Penn, as well as teaching 2 courses. So this particular semester, I'm teaching 2 seminar courses. I'm teaching a learning and memory class, as well as a senior level class on neurodegenerative diseases. So typically those classes will run once a semester, so fall and then spring. And so we're just kind of working on which ones will be up for next year. But yeah, so prior to coming to Penn, I worked at Haverford College for about 8 years, where initially I was cross-appointed at Haverford and still working in a research lab at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And then I moved over full-time to Haverford. So one of the attractive things about coming over to Penn from Haverford was the ability to work with undergraduates in terms of advising and mentorship. And that's one of the things that I had really enjoyed doing at Haverford, was really talking to students as they move into their sophomore or junior or senior years about their research and their future research directions. And so as much as I love teaching, I also really enjoy that aspect. So when this opportunity came along to kind of serve as a faculty advisor to this undergraduate group, I was pretty excited to kind of be involved. So as I had mentioned, I think when I first met Larissa, Larissa's here, I'm happy to be involved as much or as little as the society would like. So, you know, as soon as maybe COVID is behind us, I think there's so many opportunities for us to do so many, you know, interesting things in person with the program in mind, with the neuroscience department. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that. So just a little bit about my background. So if I had to say what my research interests are in a nutshell, it would be neuroplasticity. So I originally started as an undergraduate doing my undergraduate thesis in a learning and memory lab that was really interested in looking at how different brain rhythms influenced different learning tasks. So that was kind of my foray into neuroscience research. I really lucked out. I had an awesome mentor who, you know, I had to get over a couple of hurdles in terms of I was nervous to work with rats, things like that. And they were really good at kind of just not forcing the issue and allowing those things to kind of happen. So, you know, I really appreciated that early mentorship I had as an undergraduate. My graduate work really revolved around still neuroplasticity and moving a little bit away from learning and memory into epilepsy research. So those two are very intimately connected. I mean, some of the changes that you see in the brain as a result of seizures are also similar mechanisms that are implicated in parts of learning and parts of memory. So that's kind of where those interests linked. And so really it was looking at how the brain changes with insults or trauma that can lead it to develop epilepsy, months or years down the road. That became the focus of both my graduate work and then my postdoc work. And that's really where I found myself coming to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I was looking at how injury, what are some of the early genomic changes and structural changes that are happening in the brain that can lead an individual or an animal to develop seizures down the road. So that was really where the focus of my work was. And just, I kind of changed gears a little bit, still sticking in the neuroplasticity, staying within the neuroplasticity realm, when I was able to kind of develop a research program at Haverford. And I worked with undergraduate students there as part of, they were involved in the planning of the study and running the study and all aspects of it. And we became really interested in looking at how the brain of female rats changed when exposed to chronic tamoxifen. So tamoxifen is a estrogen receptor modulator, and it's a drug that's commonly given to women who have been diagnosed with estrogen positive breast cancer. So it's a modulator, acts as an antagonist, and kind of blocks estrogen receptor modulation, and mostly in premenopausal women. But a lot of women who take this report all kinds of cognitive and behavior, kind of mood issues, and that hadn't really been investigated. So having left Haverford now, we were able to kind of complete most of that study before COVID. And now I'm working with undergraduates at Haverford, just trying to kind of wrap that study up. So we're looking at some of the changes that are that we know to be associated with estrogen modulation. So we're looking at how BDNF, one of the neurotrophic factors, changes with tamoxifen exposure, and how that could lead to some of the plasticity changes that we saw. So I said all that just to kind of give you an idea of what my research background is, but just that, one of the things I loved about being at Haverford was just all the opportunities that the students had to engage in research. And I can see that it's very similar to the program at Penn. There's, over 200 labs at Penn for students to get involved in terms of neuroscience focused research. And the neuroscience program itself has a number of opportunities for students to become involved in research as part of their undergraduate curriculum. So I think that's kind of the focus of your conversation tonight, if I kind of understand it, but is to, I think provide, you can, in terms of peer mentorship of kind of what is the process of finding a mentor and finding a lab, et cetera. So I was hoping maybe Dr. McLean could have come tonight, but she was unable to come this week, but because she's the person who's in charge of the research program in the neuroscience program. And knows the exact dates at which you have to apply for the 399 or 499, but it's pretty straightforward, and all of that information can be found on the website. So I think the main question people have that I've noticed during the advising hours is, what's the difference between doing 399 research and 499? And often that is just an extension of the research. So the 499, my understanding of it is it's just much more self-directed research. And you have a thesis symposium that you have to kind of present a poster, et cetera, at the end of the day. So so that's kind of my introduction. And I just want to say that I'm normally can be found in 12211. So I haven't been there lately with this surge. So I'm mostly working from home when I can. And when things kind of lighten up, stop by and say hi if you have a chance.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was for this introduction, and so we could know a little bit more about you and your research and the department itself. So now we will move on to our first panel for independent study. So I would like to welcome Hiba and Ali, our panelists for this panel. And so don't you guys first introduce yourself with your year, major, and what you're doing for your research?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Hiba. I'm a junior in the college studying neuroscience. I totally missed the second half of what you said for introductions, but I am in my second half of like my year of independent research. So I took 399 last semester and I'm doing 499 now. I'm doing it a year early, so most people do it like their senior year, but that's only because I am applying to med school and I wanted all my like research stuff done before then. I think that's pretty much it for my introduction, but yeah.
Right, what about you, Ali?
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Ali. I'm a fourth year student majoring in neuroscience, and I'm doing my second semester of research with the ISH Lab over at CHOP. I did 399 last semester in the fall, and then I'm continuing like Dr. Kelly said, 499, which has just mainly been an extension.
All right, so the first question probably that comes to mind is what makes the independent study a different research experience? How does it differ from previous experiences that you had with research? You can start with Hiba.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely saw like a lot of changes from when I did like research in like the labs that I was in freshman and sophomore year versus the research that I'm doing now. One main takeaway that I'm getting is the research that I did previously was more driven towards like helping others complete their projects. So I was learning skills that were important in continuing like projects that other people in lab already started and were working on, just needed assistance with. But in 399 and 499, I'm currently working with the Chen lab. So it's a lot of like neurotrauma, neurosurgery type stuff. So I get to kind of design my own project and work on it. And it's basically up to me. So if there's like a certain way that I want to do my behavior. So I work with rats and I do a lot of like behavior experiments. If there's a certain way that I see that I want to do my experiment that I think will work better than current protocols, I'm able to implement that, which is really cool. Like being able to kind of like design the direction of your own project is something that the skills that I kind of gained from just doing research my first 2 years led up to this point. And then now I'm able to kind of implement them in a like more innovative way where it's kind of like, it's like super independent. So it's all up to me. And then I get to ask mentors and other people for advice on where to take the project. But at the end of the day, I'm the one like controlling it.
Cool. Yeah. Parallel to a lot of what Hiba said, like having worked in one other lab in the past, it kind of just felt like I was coming on because they needed extra hands on deck, and that was what I was there to do. In terms of some of the other practical aspects of pursuing independent study versus some of the other kinds of research that Penn offers, for example, one consideration I had to take into account was the fact that I'm doing this for credit and it was going to be a year-long commitment. Whereas like the previous lab I was in, that was something I was paid for by the hour. And I kind of just basically left whenever I did. And then part of it is also you actually have to find a lab that's willing to take you on and keep track of what you're doing while you're pursuing that research for credit, because they have to assess you at the end of it. You have to produce a written work. And so by nature, the lab I ended up in for my independent study compared to the lab I was in previously had much more of like a hands-on like mentorship aspect, in the sense that there was someone I was checking in with on a weekly basis. I was receiving feedback. I was learning the best practices of what it means to, I guess, try to pursue these things in a scholarly fashion. As far as I know, people's mileage may vary when it comes to that, in terms of what lab you do end up with and how much mentorship bandwidth they have to offer to you. But in general, independent study, there is that stronger supervision aspect.
Yeah, the last part actually was what my next question was getting at, which was why did you decide pursuing independent study, and how did you go about finding a thesis lab, and what were your expectations versus the reality of what you ended up doing? And we may start with Ali now.
Sure. I guess just to pick up right where I left off. So why did I decide to pursue independent study? that kind of happened to me in backwards order, actually. I had just wanted to pursue a different research experience and kind of branch out a little more. And I went to the online Penn faculty directory. I just read a bunch about the different professors whose names were listed there. And then I just went through the whole cold emailing gamut. I sent out however many dozen emails, and then the faculty that I heard back from, I interviewed with, and we discussed my interests. I discussed what they had to offer me. And then the lab that I found myself most compatible with was actually do independent study. And that's just what I found most attractive to do as a senior. And so that's how I ended up there. And that's how I found my thesis lab, just in terms of cold emailing and reaching out. In terms of my expectations versus reality, and in terms of what I'm doing on a daily basis, well, because I have to produce a thesis by the end of the school year, there has been just more intellectual engagement than I would have expected, in terms of me having to do a lot more literature reading on publications in the field, so I can actually have like well-cited background section, or kind of read about different methodologies that people in the field have used that I can incorporate into my own research project, or just see how like people are doing things right now when it comes to the specific neuroscience niche that I'm working with. And so that is kind of maybe a little bit different in terms of, if you're working with a different lab, you can just kind of come in, and if it's a wet lab, you're just doing wet lab stuff, and
Do you see that?
Yeah, so for me, the way that I found my lab was over my freshman and sophomore year. I worked in the lab that was actually across like the bench, which is really funny because I thought I would continue on my 399 499 project with like the same lab, but at the end of the day I realized that I kind of wanted to orient the project I was working on to something that I found personally a little bit more like exciting. So what I worked on before when I did like my work study was more like animal behavior, but it was kind of figuring out what happens after you get brain injuries. So it was kind of just like evaluating what happens after you like suffer like an insult to the brain. But then the lab that I am doing my 399/499 in was more on like solving the problem, which I found a little bit more like exciting to pursue. So my journey is like a little bit different, because my 399 project and my 499 project are they're connected, but not as connected as like I thought it would be, and as like it just changed a lot. And I think that's kind of part of research. Like research isn't always like what you think it's going to end up being. There's a lot of like changes that happen within it. So last semester I worked a lot with like brain transplants and like silk transplants to try to like create new it's kind of like hard to like phrase it without going too much into the science, but basically we took out parts of the brain and tried to create replacements that could like mirror the tissues and like the structure that a normal brain has, and try to like regain like functionality. So I worked a lot with that, and it was really interesting. But the project was, I wanted something a little bit more hands-on for this semester. So I decided to kind of transition back into animal behavior work, and I'm working with rats that already have transplants in them and trying to see if they have like changes in their memory. So my like research project is kind of like all over the place, but that's something that my lab prioritizes a lot, where it's like, if you find something that you can pursue, it doesn't have to be like continuing like the same exact project that you started, but if it's something that you find a little bit more interesting and you want to go in that direction, if there's other people that are working on that, they're more than happy to help you out with that. So I thought that was really cool. And in terms of like expectations versus reality for doing these kind of projects, I expected it to be like a lot more like difficult and mentored. So it's a little bit different than Ollie's perspective. But for me, I'm given like a lot of independence, and I can go in, kind of make the decisions that I want with kind of how I want to run the project. And then it's fully up to me to reach out to the people that I find can help me with the project. So like this past week, I had to reach out to like 4 different people, like one that's working in more of like the coding and like EPhys or electrophysiology stuff, because I don't know how to code at all. So now I have to like reach out to the right people to learn how to kind of get these skills. And it's very like very independent in a sense where I have to kind of make sure that everything that I'm doing for my project like comes from me. So if there's certain angles that I want to approach, it's like fully up to me to like reach out to the right people to be able to do that, which is not something that I expected, but it's like a good thing because I'm able to kind of like grow in like the different ways of not only doing research, but kind of like working with others in the lab in order to get the project done that I want. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you for these answers. So one thing that I heard from both of your responses is that your previous experiences somehow shaped or the direction of your project, or like help you make a more informed decision about what you were gonna do next. So my question is, what was the most difficult part about getting your idea off the ground? Like what do you think was a crucial moment in actually making the project happen? And we may start with you, Augustine.
In like developing the project, is that what you said?
Yeah, like from the idea to the actual experiments you run or analysis you run, or
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So there's a lot of like literature reading that goes behind like creating your own project, because you have to make sure that nobody else has like A, done it before, or B, it's like something that's like that you're able to do within like the short time span that you have given for like a 399 and 499 class. So being able to A, like find something that you're interested in, and then B, like narrow it down to something that you're able to actually accomplish in like the given time period. And then also C, like making sure you have all the skills to be able to do that. It's like really hard to find like that one gap. So there were a lot of ideas that I was interested in, but I knew that it wasn't feasible for me to like fully complete that in the time that I had. So like, for example, if I really wanted to run a study on like creating a certain type of transplant and then transplanting it into the animals and then running the behavior test, that could take up to like 3 or 4 years. And I only have like 2 semesters. So you have to be able to kind of like compromise on like the project that you want to do and make sure that it's something that you're able to kind of like fit into like the limitations that are already present. If that kind of makes sense.
what about you, Ali?
Yeah, for me, I would say there is a little bit of contrast in comparison to how Hiba had her experience, which I guess just also just speaks to the breadth of experiences that you can have as an independent study. The lab I ended up in was in the process of like the last third of multiple different research projects. When I say the last third, that was still like 1 or 2 more years of work before any major publications could come out of what they were doing. And I ended up in one part of the lab where they had collected a lot of mouse behavioral footage, irradiated mouse behavioral footage, and they wanted someone to come and help automate the tabulation of the behaviors on display instead of having to sit down and mark the behaviors that the mice displayed frame by frame. And so my mentor and I ended up discovering this one deep learning software that had not been used in a behavioral detection automation study before. It was only published very recently. And so what my project ended up being for last semester was taking that software and applying it to the specific behavioral test that we were trying to, I guess, tabulate, which had never been applied before. And that kind of sounds easier said than done, but ended up taking me the whole semester. And so the way I found my topic, the short of it is that there was a specific problem that the lab was facing, and they needed someone who could come in and could basically like just tinker with the software or figure out a different or innovative way to kind of tabulate the massive amount of data that we had to work with. So in that sense, there was not a lot of overlap between it and my previous research topic. And the most difficult part about getting the idea for my independent study off the ground actually wasn't the idea itself. I kind of had my work